Just vegan or whole food plant based? Does diet quality matter really when we're talking about being plant based and your health? Well, let's find out. Welcome to the Exam Room Live, brought to you by the Physicians Committee. Hello, I am the weight loss champion, Chuck Carroll. Thank you so very much for watching in more than 150 countries around the world and making the Exam Room one of the most consumed nutrition podcasts anywhere on the planet today. Now, in our whole food plant-based circles, we know whole food plant-based SOS-free is the gold standard when it comes to health, or so we thought. Because there's another group of people who say, well, look, that's just too hard. I could never, ever, ever do that, so I'm not even going to bother trying. But others say, though, here, let's simplify it. Just cut the meat, cut the dairy, cut the fish. You're good to go. No other rules apply. You want an Impossible Burger? Eat it. Throw a big old slice of vegan cheddar on top of that and enjoy, my friend. But is that still doing damage to your health? I don't know, but I know somebody who does. Dr. Hana Kahleova is a whiz kid when it comes to health and nutrition. She's the director of clinical research here at the Physicians Committee. She is a friend of mine. She's a friend of the show. She is super smart, and I'm so glad that you are here. Dr. Hana Kahleova, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Chuck.
So this is an interesting question. I am so thrilled to be talking about this. I can't even begin to tell you how many emails we get from people who are like, well, listen, what about all of these Impossible Whoppers and all of the frozen vegan dinners that I see now in the grocery store? Can I still eat those and be healthy? And really, because a lot of this is still so new, we're still kind of figuring all that out. But it seems like you and your team of researchers are starting to piece this puzzle together. What can you tell us?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a super important topic. So let me share my screen.
We've
And
got it up here for you.
yeah, I prepared a few slides for you. So when we're talking about a vegan diet, does diet quality matter? Well, you summed it up, Chuck. You know, there are some people who say it has to be a whole food plant-based diet and it has to be SOS free. And, another group of people are like, oh, come on, you don't need to be that strict, like if you're going vegan, there's still a room for a little bit of some, processed foods that may not be, nutritionally as dense, but that, kind of increase the enjoyment of the diet, right? And sometimes when the whole food plant-based people just like push people too much, like your diet needs to be ideal or it's just black or white, then sometimes what happens is that people who are not vegan respond in a negative way, and they're like, I cannot eat only vegetables all the time. Like, I need, some pizza and chips. Like, I could do vegan, but if it's not good, then I'll just stay where I am. So, this debate is really important for people. And sometimes the non-vegan people even feel like if vegan unhealthy foods are kind of in the same boat as unhealthy non-vegan foods, why even bother with a vegan diet? Like, let me just stay where I am and I don't need to change anything. And to this argument, I'd like to say, look, uh, junk food is not the same coming from animal and from plant sources. So when we look at red meat consumption and the risk of diabetes, each half a serving a day was associated with an increased risk of by 48% of type 2 diabetes. And, this is just enormous. While with the so called unhealthy vegan foods, the risk is not that great at all. Uh, Hold that thought. I'll come to the numbers a bit later, but let me first start with what is healthy plant foods and what is unhealthy plant foods. Uh, there, there are some classifications. One of them most widely used systems is the plant-based dietary index, which gives negative points to all animal foods. So that's meat, fish, eggs, dairy, and animal fat, and gives positive points to all plant foods, and then divides up the plant foods in the healthy and unhealthy plant foods. So to give you some visual, the healthy plant foods in this classification, these contain the fruits and vegetables and whole grains and legumes, nuts and seeds, healthy plant oils, and it also includes coffee and tea. The unhealthy plant foods in this classification include fruit juice, white bread, and processed grains, sodas, sweets, and also potatoes. So you may have noticed some kind of discrepancies, like why, for example, would oil be a part of the healthy plant foods? Or why would potatoes be a part of the unhealthy plant foods? Well, this is a classification that comes from observational studies, and that's why we decided to take a closer look. And remember how in the beginning I told you that half a serving of red meat a day increases the risk of type 2 diabetes by 48%? Let's look at the healthy and unhealthy plant foods and the diabetes risk. So this is an analysis of 3 large observational studies in the US. And over the follow-up, the increase in the overall plant-based dietary index by 10% was associated with a 7% decrease in the risk of diabetes. So the more plant foods in general you eat, the better. If you only increase the consumption of plant foods by 10%, then your risk of diabetes went down by 7%, which is pretty good. If people started consuming more of the healthy plant foods, classified previously, then the risk of diabetes went down by 9% for each 10% increase in the healthy plant-based dietary index. Now, when people changed the consumption of unhealthy plant-based dietary index or unhealthy plant-based foods, the risk of diabetes didn't change at all. So these were not the healthiest. This was not the healthiest option, because if you ate veggies instead of white bread or sweets, you would get benefits, obviously, in the reduction of diabetes. But no increase in diabetes is still much better than a 48% increase with red meat, with only half a portion a day. So that's, to summarize, like the context for this discussion. And we decided to analyze the data from our randomized clinical trial, in which we had 244 overweight people who needed to lose some weight. And we randomly assigned them to follow a low-fat vegan diet, which consisted of fruits and vegetables and grains and legumes for 16 weeks. And the other group, they stayed on their usual diet for 16 weeks. Now, as expected, on the low-fat vegan diet, people were losing nicely weight. They lost about 14 pounds on average in 16 weeks. So that's about 1 pound a week. And most of the weight loss was due to fat loss. Now, what happened to the plant-based dietary index? So obviously, they switched to a vegan diet. So the plant-based dietary index increased significantly on the vegan diet. And what happened to the healthy and unhealthy plant based dietary index? The healthy plant based dietary index increased significantly, uh, and the same for the unhealthy plant based dietary index. In other words, people started consuming more plant foods coming both from healthy foods, according to the classification that was shared earlier, and to a lesser extent, also due to an increase in unhealthy, so called unhealthy plant based foods. Now, what was fascinating is that we tested out the relationship between all these three indices and weight loss. And we found out that all plant foods were associated with weight loss. So, um, coming off of all the animal products was beneficial for body weight. People lost weight by just going vegan, by starting to consume uh, the plant foods, both healthy and to a lesser extent also the unhealthy foods. So even the so-called unhealthy plant foods were helping with weight loss, even though to a lesser extent than the so-called healthy plant foods. And what we also found out is that oil and any fat, including oil, was actually slowing down the weight loss. So it should not be included in the healthy plant foods. So to summarize, where's the line between the healthy and the unhealthy plant foods? Well, I'd like to know what you think. Let me just say that sometimes even some of the liabilities may be turned into assets. And what I mean by that, when you have someone who needs to lose weight, who's not vegan, by emphasizing how whole food plant-based diet they need to follow and that they cannot eat any chips, sometimes when we relax the rules a bit, we can really help them, because even the so-called unhealthy plant foods may become assets for their weight loss. By just going vegan, it may really help them. And with that, I'd like to encourage you to eat plants. I guess I'm on the right show for this, right?
I would say so for sure. Man, that brings up a lot of questions, Dr. Kahleova, a whole lot of questions. I want to start first with fat because, as we know, fat really is a big driver in terms of diabetes risk. But
Yeah.
then I hear you talking about even these unhealthy, quote unquote, plant based foods are really going to help somebody lower the risk of diabetes. So, is that to say that something like an avocado, or coconut or nuts and seeds that are notoriously higher in fat than other plant foods, they're not going to pose at all that same diabetes risk that a meat or dairy derived product would?
That's right. But I need to say that what we used as a study diet was a low fat vegan diet. So people were benefiting from the low fat vegan diet and keeping the fat content low. That meant minimizing the oil consumption and minimizing also the nut and avocado consumption.
All right. So, can you give us then an example of some of the less healthy, the more unhealthy, quote unquote, again, vegan foods that these individuals on the low fat diet were eating? Just so people were like, huh, okay, well, maybe roasted chickpeas, for example, would have been okay in this particular study.
So the quote unquote unhealthy plant foods, they include, for example, orange juice. But in some studies, it's been shown that fruit juice, like 100% orange juice or other fruit juices, they reduce cardiovascular risk and may also help with weight loss, actually. So, let me just say it's questionable whether to include fruit juice among the unhealthy plant foods. Another so called unhealthy plant food would be potatoes. And again, this is coming from observational studies where um, French fries is the mostly consumed vegetable in the United States. But what do people consume their French fries with? They get a burger with French fries. So of course, but can you include, let's say, potatoes in your diet when you consume beans or bean chili with your potatoes? I think the answer is clear. Then another food. So we have fruit juice and potatoes so far among the so-called unhealthy plant foods. Then we have white bread and processed grains. So that would include white rice, white bread. And, sometimes you're in a situation where you'd like to choose some whole grains, but maybe the best you can do for lunch is a Subway sandwich, and you cannot get the whole grain all the time. So sometimes you just need to settle uh, for white bread, and the results from our study suggest that you don't need to worry about it so much, that it's more important for you to get a vegan sandwich, even if it's with white bread. Then sometimes people make different choices based on, oh, it has to be, this and that. And it's kind of becoming all or nothing. And the last two unhealthy plant foods included soda and sweets. And in our sub analysis, sweets kind of slow down the weight loss, but most probably not because of the sugar only, but most probably because sweets also it tends to be a combination of sugar and some fat. Like when you look at cookies or chocolate, both of them contain not only sugar but also fat.
This is, I mean, man alive, this is interesting to me. So you've mentioned potatoes a number of times. Are we talking specifically about white potatoes here? Or are we lumping in sweet potatoes, even Japanese purple sweet potatoes here?
So the data from the observational studies classify only white potatoes among the unhealthy, plant foods. But all I'm saying is that they they analyze the data from the observational studies from the US, where French fries is the most consumed vegetable. And, people consume French fries mostly with burgers, with meats and with cheese. So is it the potatoes or is it the other foods that they're consuming their potatoes with?
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm wondering is if you are introducing more plant foods in general, are a lot of these benefits coming simply because you're
Mm,
crowding out
right.
a lot of the even greater unhealthy foods, the burger, for instance, right? That's not on your plate, boom, automatically you're going
Yeah.
to see a benefit
Yeah.
because you're just not eating the hamburger at that point.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting stuff. You know what I would love to see done? I would love to see this broken down a little bit further and
Mm.
get a little bit more refined, even though, refined, that's kind of a dirty word on this
Yay.
show. But I would love to see the data refined a little bit further so that we could break it down and look at something like, okay, I mean, we're talking about white rice and whole potatoes here, even French fries. So, all right, well, let's make a delineation then between a baked russet potato,
Mm.
a white potato, and then French fries. What's the difference there in terms of health impact? What's the difference between a baked sweet
Mm.
potato and sweet potato chips? What's the difference there? Let's look at the difference between an Impossible Burger and a regular beef Whopper from Burger King, something like that. Let's really break it down and really get in there. Um, and find our answers because I think that there's I mean, this is nutrition science. It's still kind of an emerging thing, so there's a lot of room for growth. But
Yeah.
do you think that if we were to really take a closer look at everything kind of in that regard and really break it down, you know, would we continue to see some surprising findings there? Would that be beneficial, do you think?
Oh, I love this proposal. I love this suggestion, Chuck. And I have some good news for you because we have some analyses in the works right now that will actually look at all these foods in more detail. So stay tuned.
Yeah, yep. I'm holding on with bated breath here because I mean, I mean, I'm obviously not the doctor here. I'm not the researcher. But I'm a lay kind of a guy, and I just find it hard to believe that there's not, like red light, yellow light, and then
Mm,
green light here, where you could really break it down a little bit further. So if you look at cheese, you could say, okay, well, full fat cheddar, that's going to be in the red light. Then you've got your vegan cheddar, which is commercially marketed. Well, maybe
mm.
that would fall in the yellow camp. And then the green light would be something like nutritional yeast,
Yeah.
right? So you break it down like that, and then we could really look at the metabolic effects here that food could have. That's just fascinating stuff. Um, because again, I was having this conversation not too terribly long ago on the show with Dr. Barnard, even in terms of cholesterol risk
Mm,
and some of the whole plant foods like coconut, right? You eat a lot of
yeah.
coconut, your cholesterol is going to go up. So I would imagine that a lot of these processed foods that are coconut derived, you would see an effect on cholesterol there, even though they are plant
Mm.
based. I don't know. It's fascinating. I just want to see more research. So bring it on, Dr. Kahleova. Just keep bringing it. Back up the truck of knowledge, would you please?
Oh, my pleasure. Absolutely.
All right. More to come. Dr. Hana Kahleova, appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chuck.
If your health IQ is a couple of points higher than it was a few minutes ago, go ahead and like this video or subscribe to the YouTube channel. And to take it even higher, head over to Apple Podcast or wherever you get your favorite shows. Look for the Exam Room by the Physicians Committee. Hit the subscribe button there as well and help to make your world a healthier place.